Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
Welcome back, Kings fans. I'm Jesse Cohen. This is All the Kings Men. I hope you're all having a satisfying Thanksgiving. The episode you're about to hear is a revisit of the top 10 questions we asked at the start of the season. Now, to be perfectly clear, we recorded this last week, so the loss to the Sharks and the wins against Seattle and Winnipeg had not yet happened. I don't think that makes any of what we discussed irrelevant or obsolete, and if anything, I think it actually gives a little bit more context to our conversation. At any rate, happy Thanksgiving, Kings fans. Hope you enjoy the episode. All right, I think we've passed the quarter poll at this point. We're recording this on Friday the 22nd. We're revisiting the top 10 questions that we asked about the LA Kings 2024-25 season at the start of the season. Joining me, Nick Nixon. How are you doing today, Nick?
Wonderful, Jesse. Great to be back with you.
And Jim Fox. How are you doing today, Jim?
Not as wonderful as Nick.
Oh, okay. Do we want to talk about it, or we're just moving on?
He sounded just so good. I can't be that good.
All right. We should all be so lucky, right?
Yes.
All right, well, let's just jump into it because we got 10 questions to cover, and I think each question is going to break down into sub-conversations, I suspect. Number one, how will injuries impact the season? Nick, when we started with asking these questions, it was right after the Drew Doughty and Arthur Kaliyev injuries. Since then, there have been more, and I think for right now, 20-something games into the season, the simplest answer is injuries have impacted the season in many ways.
Yeah, and truth be known, every team goes through injuries. Yeah. So we're not going to use this as an excuse. But to start with Doughty, we were all wondering at the start of the season where his minutes go. Now, he plays, 25 to 28 minutes on average every game. That doesn't mean you've got to figure out who plays all those minutes, because whoever is in the lineup replacing him is going to play at least 15. So, okay, let's say 8 minutes extra a night because Drew is the ice time leader. Where do they go? And I think it has not been an issue statistically because on the power play, they've used young Brant Clark basically to replace Drew on the number one unit. It was pretty good early on. It struggled lately, the number one unit. And on the PK, Gavrikov's numbers have gone up, where he's approaching career high numbers for time on ice. So I think they've done an admirable job at filling in for those extra Drew Doughty minutes. And Mikey Anderson, who would usually play with Drew as a regular partner, would be out there on the PK. He still is with Gavrikov and the newcomer Edmonton. So I don't see the injuries to this point, 20 games into the season, as being a major factor in the Kings' success or the Kings' lack of success.
That's fair.
The measurement quotient system, how you do it would be very interesting because as far as I'm aware, and maybe it's because Drew's not there to take those minutes, but overall, point production from Kings defensemen is way up as a group, as a team. So it's the Austin Matthews. You get rid of him and you win. Right in Toronto, right? He's been injured and they're winning. So Drew's no longer there. Now we're scoring. The other thing that just comes to mind is you do miss Drew. It's, again, how do you measure that? And I think Nick was touching on it. It's how you disperse those minutes, and then is the player that's getting those extra minutes capable of playing at a sustained level to be productive and to be effective. Because we all know, right? Each guy has their own slot, right? And once they get above that slot position, meaning, they go from 18 minutes to 20 minutes, it doesn't seem like, all of a sudden they're out of their comfort zone and it's not working. The other area would be goaltending, right? Darcy Kemper's been hurt, but I don't see a lot. The numbers look pretty good to me as far as goaltenders. So it's very interesting. Again, Doughty out of the lineup, and yet the defensive analytics look pretty good. So I would have to be in agreement with Nick. I don't think it's been a factor. We'd have to go deep. We'd have to go 3 hours into a podcast to really point out where this affects other guys and what's going on. But the major analytic numbers, I don't think have been affected by injury.
Yeah, up until the other night, which would have been game 19 before the Buffalo game. If the Kings had won that game, they would have been in first place. And I don't think any of us would have thought that would be a scenario given who was not available and hasn't been available since the start of the year.
I want to push back on one word in that sentence because it's a word I've been hearing a lot lately, and it's a word that I'm becoming less and less comfortable with. And that word is if. Because at the end of the year, what gets rewarded isn't ifs, it's was. If that made any sense.
Oh, yeah. Well, then let's just project. How many points would the Kings end up with if we keep on the same pace?
I'd have to sit here and do the math, which I will happily do. They are currently at...
So it's basically 4 times.
23, right? 92, 94.
Okay. So
around there.
They're at 575 points percentage.
Yeah. So you're not there, but you're almost there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not guaranteed a playoff spot, but you'd be right on the cusp of.
Usually what I do is
94.3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually to make the playoffs, you have to win at least half your games. That's step number one. And if you can play 600 hockey, you're going to be in.
Right.
And that's what the Kings have been the last couple of years. And 600 hockey is 98, 99 points. And the Kings are a little bit below that pace right now.
Part of the reason
but they're still in the conversation.
Part of the reason I'm pushing back so hard on that is, again, we're recording on the 22nd. The last game was the game against Buffalo. And part of the reason I'm pushing back on that is that they are 1-3 in their last 4 and 2 of 4 in their last 6. So I'm just personally in a less positive mindset as far as performances. So that's why I'm pushing back
I
on
will
the
not,
F.
and I don't think I was the person that used it, right? So it was Nick.
Yeah,
definitely Nick.
We're yelling at Nick.
I will not use the word if the rest of this podcast. If I do,
big if true. Yeah. Let's move to the second question because it dovetails nicely with what we were just talking about, which is how will the D-corps be deployed in Doughty's absence? With Doughty out, I maybe foolishly assumed that the second and third pairs would be kept the same, and we would just find a replacement, not a replacement. Because obviously you can't replace Drew Doughty, but we would be, we'd say, okay, well, Burrows is going to be whatever, 75% of Drew Doughty, and we'll just roll out Anderson and Burrows with the understanding that it'll never be Anderson and Doughty. The Kings have not done that. Edmondson and Clark have stayed fairly consistent as a pair, but we've seen Gavrikov move to the right to play with Anderson, and we've seen Spence take his spots with Anderson. We've seen Caleb Jones in the lineup. We've seen Kyle Burrows in the lineup. That, Nick, surprised me more than anything, just how versatile Jim. It probably shouldn't have surprised me, given Jim Hiller's penchant for for swapping things up. Yeah. But I was surprised at how different the D-corps has been deployed.
Well, again, they started the season with 8 defensemen on the roster, and Jim Hiller is a first-year full-time head coach, first full season. So I think we all expected some experimenting to go on, and it continues to this day, not only with defensemen, but also with line combinations. And sometimes you don't find out until you try something that it works. And with Gavrikov and Anderson being a pair quite a bit the last few games, maybe 5 or 6, maybe a bit more, been a pretty good combination. I don't think we ever looked at that early in the season because we were lefty-righty, which is what everybody likes to match up with. But through the experimentation, I think they've been I think Mikey Anderson's having a heck of a year, doing all the little things well. Foxy notices when we do games, standing up at the blue line, taking the man, the good quick reads. And Gavrikov's, like we said earlier, his ice time is up, and you just don't get the ice time unless you're playing well enough to earn it. So that's been a real pleasant surprise, I think, so far.
To follow up on what Nick was talking about, and Drew Doughty comes up. That's just going to be it. So the defense pairs, when he is there, everything is almost etched in stone until the next guy goes down. When he's not there, and again, just to follow up on Nick, there's more, experimentation. You have to try to see if it works. You're not as confident that it is going to work if Drew was in the lineup. And I use the word if. So it's one of those things where certain guys have stepped up. Certain guys have been inconsistent because perhaps they're being forced into a role. Again, that slotting in position I was just talking about earlier, that you get a little bit too much than you can handle. The pair that's been there has been Clark and Edmondson, new adjustment in Edmondson. So I assume once they acquired Edmondson, that was their thought process. When we bring in Brandt Clark, all of a sudden we have a partner for him. That's been the one that stayed the same. At times, the Gavrikov-Anderson has been quality shutdown pair. And, but it's maybe even back to my first answer about Drew. There's so many, I think, intangible, unmeasurable areas that it's affecting, but the measurable areas look pretty good.
Ever wonder what top athletes eat to perform at their best? Superfood Direct, the preferred catering partner of the LA Kings, is here to fuel your game. For athletes, nutrition isn't just fuel, it's the key to peak performance. Superfood Direct delivers chef-prepared meals that help you build strength, boost endurance, and recover faster. With over 11 years of experience, every meal is balanced with the perfect mix of proteins, carbs, and healthy fats to power you on and off the ice. Ready to fuel your greatness? Visit superfd.com/direct and get 20% off your first order with promo code LA20. That's LA20. This was the biggest surprise to me, and I stumbled on this the other night quite by accident. As far as minutes played by defensive pairs at 5-on-5 for the Kings, Gavrikov and Anderson, 219 minutes. Edmondson and Clark, 218 minutes.
There you go.
There's no way if Drew Doughty had been healthy, there's no chance that Anderson and Doughty and Gavrikov and Clark are that close in minutes played. But because Anderson and Gavrikov are not always together, you get that bunching. So I thought that was fairly interesting. We're going to move on to the next question, which is, will the changes to the special teams yield positive results? This is one of those answers that has to be taken in the micro and the macro, right? Okay. There's no point in saying, after 20 games, the power play percentage is this and the penalty kill percentage is that, because, the last game against Buffalo, they went 0 for 5. Well, that's not going to help your total numbers. And they went 1 for 3 on the penalty kill. That's not going to help your numbers, but it doesn't really matter. And honestly, even at the end of a season, after 82 games, I'm not entirely sure how valuable percentages are, because what you want is your team to be doing those things well when it matters. It doesn't really matter how, the broad view. But having said that, we're checking in at the 20 game mark. And I think the answer is, for right now, no.
The one thing that has changed of late is that they've gone to 5 forwards on the power play, which tells me that internally they're looking at things they did not like.
Yeah.
So they had to go something that has rarely been used in the history of the league, not only the Kings. So that tells me they're looking at some analytics that are saying, okay, this wasn't working, this alignment, this hand over here, this hand over there, lefty, righty, all that. It hasn't been working. The entries seem to be okay. Getting into the zone on the power play seems to be okay. But, and I hate myself for saying something because then I should be able to say what. But the staff is analyzing something they don't like, and they're going to a completely new alignment. On the penalty kill, it appears to me that they're accomplishing what they wanted to do. I don't think they've been great. I don't think they've been bad. But I would say if I put myself on the ice against last year's penalty kill, so I'm on the opposition team. I'm putting I'm a forward. I used to play the power play a little bit. I would rather play against last year's than this year's. This year's, that pressure will be a factor. It's much more difficult to move the puck around, and it's much more difficult to get the puck to a dangerous area when you're being under pressure. And I think the pressure the Kings have increased this year on the penalty kill has worked. And just back to the power play, by going to 5 forwards, that tells me that something is amiss.
Mm-hmm. 2 years ago, the Kings' power play was 25%. Last year, 23%. So pretty much the same. The one thing that stood out 2 years ago was that the Kings had 2 units that were productive. And the numbers were pretty even going through the second half of the season that year. This year, as we speak after 20 games, the second power play unit does not have a power play goal.
It's not great.
So does that force you to keep the number one unit out there longer than they should? And I think they've only had one multiple power play goal game. That was in Ottawa. Game 3? They had 3 power play goals, and the percentages have been real low since then. But that's the one thing that really stands out to me. And you've got guys like Moore and Deneau, Byfield, who up until recently was on the second unit, Jordan Spence, second. They don't have power play goals. So I think that, and again, when you are limited in your options because of the lack of production, that forces you to go outside the box. And as Jim touched on, 5 forwards on a power play. Unheard of.
And I assume they are using the power play to try to get Quinton Byfield going.
Well, they said as much, right?
Well, yes, get him more touches,
Yeah.
get him. And, last year, and it's been a thing I've been talking about, it's more of that lunch pail in the grind areas. Quinton was phenomenal in front last year. That phenomenal is too strong of a word because the Kings weren't first. He was really effective in deflections, screens, recovery of loose pucks, battles in front, getting sticks. And, he's had the slow start. So they've had, you're asking the effect on the special teams. So now they've probably looked at a 5-on-5 area and said, we've got to make an adjustment on the power play to try to get the 5-on-5 working.
Since November 4th, which may seem like an arbitrary date, but it's the last 8 games, Kings power play is 9.5%. So that's struggling. The penalty killing in that stretch is 85.7. So to your point, Jim, the penalty kill is improving, if not vastly improved from last year. Power play remains a work in progress, and that's got to change. But to your point about the 5 forwards,
I'll go into that later on our if the last question we're going to address is the question I think it is.
It will
get into that later.
All right.
And quickly, just to finish up the PK, kudos to Byfield and Fogle on the PK.
100%.
I mean, they've been a pair, and I was just talking to Warren Fogle after the practice today, and I think they've only been on the ice for 1 power play goal against. So, younger guys. I mean, we keep waiting for Kopitar to not do a lot of the things he's been doing for 19 seasons because of his age, but he still does them, one, because he's good at it. And of course, he starts a lot of the PKs because he wins faceoffs. So that's huge. So, but yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there because a new look on the PK has been that tandem with Fogle and Byfield, and they've been good.
Speed with length.
There you
You
go.
got 2 guys that have decent size, and they can get on you quick.
The next question ties a lot in with the last question, which is kind of how this was designed to work in the first place. I didn't know that it was going to. The next question is, will
Are you
Jim...
an engineer?
A podcast engineer.
Man.
I'm a conversation engineer. Will Jim Hiller continue to be an unpredictable, creative, unconventional coach in a full season? Absolutely. I mean, 5 forwards on the power play. At 5-on-5, 4 forwards and 1 defenseman. In overtime, 3 forwards at a time. I mean, he is not afraid to try things.
And I hope he was telling the truth when Turcotte came back.
Yes.
And he plays, and then he doesn't play in the second half of that game the other night. Because over the years, whenever we've talked to coaches about a player coming back into the lineup, are you going to see how he does it? No. If he's back in the lineup, he plays. And I don't know, Jim, if you can ever remember a situation where
I asked Jim about that.
Yeah.
If he ever remembered a situation either as a player or his former, his assistant coach, he said no. And he said his answer was, sometimes I do stupid things. Now, he was making fun of himself, but he came up with that. Nick, and I'll just follow. He had to be telling the truth because there was no injury. And if there was an injury, that would be the reason to sit him out. So we talked to Alex Turcotte the next day. I certainly, as a player, can understand why he didn't tell him before the game. If he does, okay, we're going to ease you in tonight's game, and we've got you at about the 30-minute mark. After that, we think that everyone else can take it. If you're told that before the game, your focus is gone. You're going to be thinking about when's he going to pull. So I can put a quick answer to my part of this question. Jesse, you said it all with all of the different elements that are going. Nick, you just touched on an area that we've never seen before. My synopsis of Jim Hiller is old school mentality. I think he sees the game as a teammate. He sees it. He's a player still, old school. New age, though. He is new age in a lot of different things. And Jesse, you went through a list.
Yeah. Well, so to Nick's point about, and for those of you who weren't following the last part of the conversation, Alex Turcotte returning from injury played 2 periods.
Yeah. Not even 2, just about
half the
halfway
game,
through.
maybe.
And then was on the bench, and nobody knew why. And the
no injury report.
The answer given was that Jim Hiller said we wanted him to play half the game, take it easy on him.
This is how Nick Nixon is on top of the game.
Absolutely.
If I'm going to quote, I think verbatim, we'll have to ask Jim Hiller after the game to see.
Right.
And we did.
So I asked
now his
somebody,
last shift.
Yeah.
Which a lot of skeptics would be wary of Jim's post-game comment.
Yes.
His last shift was like 1:30.
Yeah.
So did he ride the pine because he overdid?
long.
Yeah.
Now, second period, long
the
change,
skeptics on
couldn't
Twitter
get
pointed
off.
out that he turned the puck over and thought he was being punished for that. But so I asked somebody whose opinion I trust very much if they thought that Jim Hiller was telling the truth in that situation. And that person told me the answer was too specific and too unique to have been anything but the truth.
There's a Jim's in his first full season as a head coach. You don't start playing lying games because the players will sniff that out so quick and you're gone.
Yeah.
I asked Jim Hiller this morning, and I don't know what you guys thought of the question, but I asked him if he had settled on a position on communicating with his team through the media, because we all know the coaches do it, and we all know the coaches and management will say things that are not necessarily the truest.
Yes.
And so being that Jim is now 54 games into his professional or NHL head coaching career, maybe he doesn't know how he feels about it, but I thought his answer was
Jim Hiller, by the way, if he's asked a question that he does not want to get into,
he'll tell you.
He'll say, I don't want to get, instead of, I'm going to use the word lie, or sometimes, you're going to tell the whole truth. Sometimes coaches don't tell you the whole. Jim just says, you know what? I don't want to address that. And I like that.
Yeah, no,
that.
He's very straightforward. It makes it more difficult, I suspect, to be a columnist or a sports writer, but it's refreshing to have that kind of blunt honesty.
Yeah. And a lot of coaches we've heard over the years, they don't want to answer that question. They'll just talk about what they want to talk about.
Sure.
And you're going, wait a minute.
Yeah. Right.
Again, my question was.
Yeah. Next question is, this is where we start to get into some of the more difficult topics, maybe. Next question is, will Quinton Byfield continue his strong play at center in the preseason? Quinton Byfield has not excelled this season.
No. It's,
Can I put
he
it
is
that way?
he is struggling.
Yeah. All right.
He's struggling with a new role. I'm not going to say with a new position. Again, on the air, I've said a couple of times, I've noticed him using his speed to get to a puck and then slowing down because he wants to make a pass. He's trying to figure things out. We saw it in the preseason. If there's any change I can see is that the routes he was taking to build up speed and then be in position to receive a pass to go on attack, I think other teams are taking that away. So now he's in the midst of trying to find another avenue in which to get, when a player's hot, what do you say? I'm going to go mostly to basketball. Deny him the ball.
Mm-hmm.
In hockey, it's tougher to deny a hockey player the puck more than it is in basketball. You can double team, triple team. You can't do that in hockey, really. You can't. You have zone defenses, but you can't put two guys on one. It just doesn't happen. So you can't. He's trying to find that. Now, I said also, I think that he, to a certain extent, and this is where he's struggling, I believe, he's trying to hit the home run every time. He's scored 3 or 4 highlight reel goals in his career so far, his young career. Most of the goals aren't. So take, Nick, how many times I said, take the puck wide, drive wide, don't stop up, don't button hook, take it wide. That either draws a penalty, creates a chance, or fatigues the opposition because, they have to battle you. So he's in there. And yeah, I'm not even going to use the word I was going to say. I just think he's struggling right now, and there's no other way to put it. And he knows it. The team knows it. Everyone watching knows it. And unfortunately, that's what comes with being number 2 overall.
Yep. We've heard it a lot over the years. Simplify the game. Getting a shot on goal is never a bad thing, because a lot of things can happen when that does occur. And I like Jim, and we've done the games. We've seen Quinton for 20 games now. Like to see him be a little more greedy, right? Take the puck when he has the chance to shoot. Shoot it. Don't look for the second or third option. Same, I think, can be said for, a player like Philip Deneau. He's in Byfield's category as a player who's struggling to get goals here in the first quarter of the season. And there are others on that list, but I think with Byfield, maybe it gets more magnified because he is the future. He is supposed to be the guy in a couple of years as the number 1 center. So never coached, don't want to coach. When you get the chance to shoot. That's the only way you can get out of a slump.
I'm going to say 2 things, Nick. First thing is I've watched every single practice and missed a couple here and there. He is working on his shot, and from what I can see in practice, I think he will start scoring shot goals, meaning not drive goals, not deep goals, not tip goals, not rebound goals, but shot. He will start scoring those. And if I were to offer Quinton Byfield any advice right now, is to not listen to anyone giving you advice.
Easier said than done. This is one of those cases where I understand that the organization can't do everything it does with a mind towards how it's going to be received. You have to accept that you can't please everybody, and so you can't make your decisions based on how they'll be received by the fan base. But there was so much time spent over the last 6 months talking about this is Quinton Byfield's time at center, the Fiala, Fogle, Byfield line to start the season. And I'm as guilty of it as anybody is, building it up.
That's Quinton's fault because of how well he played in the preseason.
Well,
he was dominant.
But even before the preseason, it was, all right, we've traded away Deneau. We're moving Byfield back to center. It's going to be a thing, et cetera, et cetera. And then 5 games in, he gets put back on wing. Now, he only played less than a handful of games on Kopitar's wing before
Are we
being placed
going
back
there?
to center.
Are we really
no,
going
no, no.
there?
He was put back on center.
No, because you said it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You said there was a possible. I said to you, Jesse, what are you? No way he's going to go back to the wing. And then the next game he was back at wing.
But just like collectively, we as an organization.
Have you coached before?
I have no. Just like Nick, I don't want to be a coach. Because so much emphasis was put on Quinton Byfield as a center. Now, yes, he was taken number 2 overall, but last year he scored 50-something points or whatever, and it looked like he was going to have a breakout year. And then there was all this talk. Then preseason did go so well. Was it the last preseason game or the second to last preseason game? He got the hat trick in Quebec.
Yeah.
And then it's whatever. It's 2 goals in 20 games, and when you froth up a fan base and then don't deliver, and again, not that it's anybody's fault, not that you should behave, with that in the back of your mind, but I just think it puts a spotlight on what's going on.
And the spotlight should be on him.
Mm-hmm.
And the spotlight, again, he produced, and then he gets to the regular season. It has not. The makeup of the Kings lineup, because they drafted when they did, and the position that affects the future, so now you're not picking centermen because you think so that's where it is. And they picked him as a centerman, and until Andrei Kopitar, man, he keeps doing it. We need someone to take over. And I think the last podcast we did, if it wasn't with you, just someone else, it was like, let's hope at the end of the season and I said it. I said, let's hope that Quinton Byfield is the number 1 center and not Andre. Well, the way it started, that's a long way off.
Yeah.
But that's because of how well he played, I won't say everyone, I was thinking he would be able to make the step to at least be bona fide number 2 center.
And I think we're all in agreement that he was moved to the left wing earlier in the season to get him going.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But
yes,
Kings have to commit to him as a centerman, don't they? Because of Andrei's age. Philip Deneau, his age, that's a factor. And to be fair, he's not been a 1 or 2 for most of his career. A lot of people see Deneau as a great third-line center, shutdown guy. One of the reasons they brought him in, he had such a great playoff run in Montreal before the Kings signed him as a free agent. But I think you have to live with it now. He's got to figure it out. He's got to figure it out, and he's got to figure it out as a centerman.
And then I'll just go back to and other decisions the organization makes
is
based on that.
Yes, yeah.
So if you stopped, and you know what this tells me, the next game tomorrow afternoon as we're taping, Q will be at left wing.
I wouldn't be surprised, because at some point, and then this was, I'll confess, I wasn't 100% truthful in the opening episode we did where we asked these questions. What I really was thinking when I said, could Quinton Byfield be moved to the left side, was, will the team struggle enough that they need to go back to what worked last year to get wins? I think I phrased it as, if Laferriere doesn't work out, might they blah, blah, blah. But the reality was, I was worried with all the changes, whatever. Well, now we're in a position where I don't want to say that the game against the Kraken, and people will be hearing this well after the Kraken game, but I'm kind of feeling like the Kraken game is as close to a must win as you can have in the month of November. Just because, anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But
yeah, and the way the first 20 games have evolved with Byfield, Laferriere, we were wondering where his game's going to be at. I think it's fine. Got 9 goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Turcotte,
Yeah.
when he's healthy, he's been a good fit wherever they put him in there. So
let's use that to pivot into the next question.
If I can just add one, and I've said it, Nick's going to hit me because I've said it on air probably at least 5 times in opens or intermissions. So far, so good. Good. Not great.
Mm-hmm.
Not awful. So far, so good. I'm making the assumption that nice little stretch of home games here, a couple on the road in Cal, but then come December 22, 23, we'll have a real good read on this team because of that long road trip.
Yeah. And didn't someone mention earlier today the Kings have had one of the easier schedules opponent-wise in the NHL? Well, it all evens out, right?
Yep,
it catches
it
up.
does.
So maybe players that have struggled so far figure it out, and that'll be good. They'll get their game back at the right time against good opponents, and that will, give the Kings a better opportunity to get those points.
We were told today, we get it every once in a while, the shooting percentage of the Kings is way, 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 way down. History tells you that will come back to a norm, to an average. If that's the case, some of the offensive questions will be answered. If it doesn't, we're going to be sad.
So regression to the mean is definitely a thing. Unfortunately, it works the other way.
Yep.
And Alex Laferriere, the next question was, will Alex Laferriere be a capable line mate for Kopitar and Kempe? I'm not even going to address that question because he was only a line mate for them for like 4 games. So let's just use this as an opportunity to talk about Alex Laferriere. At one point, I think he was shooting around 30%.
Yes, not going to
and
be there.
that won't be sustained.
Nope.
But I think, and we talked to him this morning for all the King's men, which I think people will have heard by the time they hear this. I said to him, a lot of his goals, he's 9 at the moment. Almost all of his goals, I would argue, came as a result of his on-ice awareness, whether they were tip-ins or he was putting himself in the right position to receive a pass to make a shot. He shot the puck in such a way that he found, he was at a weird angle and there was space on the far side of the goalie. But it all, to me, stemmed from on-ice awareness. So maybe the tip-ins don't happen with the same frequency. Maybe the shooting percentage dips, but surely, Jim, his on-ice awareness and his effectiveness doesn't have to dip, even if the production dries up a little.
I think you can make the argument that the reason they moved Laferriere off the line was to get someone else going. With part and parcel with what Nick mentioned. Okay, Byfield moves up, but when Laferriere went down, the production on the line he joined went up. So he might be the catalyst in all this. And his goals have slowed down, right? He had 9. But what's a good year for him? 20. I said on one of the things earlier, bold prediction. I said 25 goals for Alex Laferriere.
What did he have? 9 last year? 12 last year.
12,
so
yeah.
I'd say
let's
15
get him
is
at
a good
20.
year. Yeah.
Oh, come on. He's at 9 now.
I'm setting the bar low. I'm saying
that's
if
good.
he's more than last year is good.
Yeah. But I think he's, and I understand the frustration of listeners when they hear me say something like I'm going to say, he helps you in so many other ways. Well, you still need to produce. He has produced. The numbers look great. The awareness he shows, Jess, the hockey sense, almost 100% of the time when you're talking about hockey sense is when you have the puck. His hockey sense of understanding when something is about to break down is right at the top. And he always seems to be the first guy back to foil the other team after they took advantage of one of our breakdowns. But Alex seems to recognize that before it happens.
And we heard that a lot last year from Todd McClellan. He's cleaning up a lot of his line mates' messes. So they recognized the responsible play that he would bring night after night. The other thing is, you get off to a good start, you're a young player, you're going to draw more attention now. Like Seattle comes in for a Saturday game. Okay, Laferriere's got 9 goals. I mean, we have to watch him. He's part of the game plan. So young players have to fight through that. And the wild card to me in all of this and the line combinations, and does Byfield stay at center? We think he does. He has to. Turcotte on the wing. And how to get Byfield going. The wild card to me is Kevin Fiala because he bounces around from line to line. Is he ever going to find a good mix, as far as a centerman and another winger? And maybe the lack of finding that good mix to this point has affected other players, other lines. So, Kevin, unfortunately, 6 games now without a point. his longest drought as a King, and he's been, second on the team in scoring in both of his first 2 years. Almost a point-a-game player.
Yep.
Need him. They need him. And they've got to figure out where he's going to fit. And it would be better if it would be with two other players that click with him.
If I can I'm going to take it one step further, and I've said it on other outlets. It's about time he figures it out. It's
Fair.
not about coaching staffs and who he's playing with. It's about time. I watch practice every day. No one is more committed than Kevin Fiala. He is a bundle of energy during practices and games, right? Energy is not an issue, right? Skill's not an issue. Stick handle, footwork, but compete. He gets in there. The counter hits. That's okay. Now, where does this all fit? Okay, the penalties seems to have gotten control of that a little bit. The turnovers, much better of late. And Kevin's argument would be, well, I'm not trying those plays, so that's why I'm not scoring.
Yeah.
Well, no. 25 games at the end of last season. We've talked about it. Outstanding from Kevin Fiala. No penalties, no risky plays, still producing. So now he's trying to, but it's time. It's time that I think Kevin is at the stage of his career now where he is going to realize and going to understand not only where he fits, but where he can help other guys fit. He's being compensated at the level of you should not worry about who he's playing with to help him. It's how he's going to help other guys.
We're going to go on to the next question now, and I'm going to very specifically say we're going to address goaltenders last on this one because it'll feed into the next question. But the question is, will the added players have the desired impact? So that's why I want to get to goalies last, because the question after that is goaltender. So we'll start with the forwards, and let's just start with Foegele because we haven't talked about him yet. And I think he's been really good, and he's had a couple of really brilliant plays.
I think his skill set is being exhibited to the max right now. Great skater. He brings size, and I think when he was joined, because the Kings were trying to overall as a group become more gritty. I don't think he fits that, but his size and speed create an element. I think he's effective. And that's a word that can be, we only have 6 hours on this podcast. I'm going to leave it. He has been effective. Whatever he's been asked to do, he's accomplished.
Just so happens, I talked to him after the practice today, and he brought up a good term that he got from Justin Williams when Warren was in Carolina, and Justin was at the end of his career and consulting there with the Hurricanes. There are skilled players out there that can play with skill and be really effective, but there are other players that have skill that have to grind it out. And he used the term a grinder with skill. And maybe that's an apt description for Warren Foegele. Now, is he going to score 30 goals every year? No. But he does so many things well from what we've seen. He's on the PK. He has the reach. Fits the new mantra of how to PK with the Kings to a T because he's quick, he's got reach, and he can be aggressive and be successful at it. At least he has so far. And he's made some great plays to set up line mates, teammates for goals. And he's gotten some greasy goals himself. So I think a grinder with skill, to me, that's what I'm seeing from Warren Foegele. And, we didn't see it the first 4 or 5 games, I don't think. And he was saying, new team. I had just played in the Stanley Cup final 2 months before I joined LA. So there was a little period there where he had to get used. But I think from game 6 or 7 till now, he's arguably been, and we've talked about this on the broadcast, he's arguably been one of the top forwards, consistent forwards, night after night.
And you say we didn't see it in the first 4 or 5 games, but let's be perfectly clear. The first 4 or 5 games, he was on a line with 2 players that we've already identified as struggling this season.
Let me just, because it fits in, a couple of days ago, I had a conversation with Warren, and I asked him. He said when he was first traded from Carolina to Edmonton, he struggled for a whole year. He said he couldn't. He said that experience helped him with the Kings to understand how he could get incorporated into his new team quicker. So he learned from the past, and he said two things. He said, when you get to a new city, you're thinking about all these things and fitting in with this teammate and getting to know this guy and going here. He said, role? What's my role? That's figure that out and figure out the system, the team system. Where he's not worrying about who his line mates are, and he's just worrying about, okay, what is coach asking me to do? And I got to really spend time on the system. And it looks like he's done that, because after the first 4 or 5, I agree, Nick, consistent.
Yeah.
It's funny because he is maybe 5th or 6th in terms of how people are looking for production, because the expectations on him were sort of muted, and because he has performed well, but not, he's not leading the team in scoring, but he's doing exactly what I feel like nobody ever talks about him. I feel like sometimes we forget he's even on the team, but to your point, he has been one of the most consistent performers.
I find myself as the analyst, when we're bringing back highlights or replays of situations that don't involve the flash, he's in a lot of those.
So 20 games, 6 goals, 4 assists, and he's a +7. Stretch that out over a total season.
Nice season.
It's great. It's exactly
career year for him. It would be.
Next on the list is going to be Tanner Jeannot. And Tanner Jeannot was brought in to address that specific need, that grit, the toughness, whatever you want to call it. I would argue he's brought exactly what he was brought in to do.
He's brought that. I talked to him. He struggled with the system early on. He told me, he said, especially the forecheck where he's tried to get in. But I've seen much more effective involvement of him lately, meaning first man pressure, make a hit, create a loose puck, those types of things. The other things are, you can count the number of fights he gets involved in, but it's still, his role is still much, it's based on intangibles.
Yeah.
It's based on
He's a deterrent.
immeasurables.
He's
So
in the
it's
lineup. The other team thinks twice,
Mhm.
right? One of the reasons why he was brought in.
So we're going to move to the blue line. I don't know, Jim, you probably have a much more formed opinion than I do about a guy like Burrows. To me, Burrows hasn't necessarily played enough for me to have a really solid read. Like, it's 8 games out of 20. I guess he's doing what he was like. And no disrespect to him, I just he hasn't played as much.
He wants to play more, but I believe he would be brought in as 7 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
So he's in exactly the slot that they expected him to be. Compete level, we know that. We've seen that. We've watched him play. He's a bulldog, but he's undersized, and he has to be slotted to a very specific opportunity.
So the next up is Joel Edmondson. And I don't know if you can evaluate Joel Edmondson without also evaluating Brandt Clarke, because they've been so clear that he is, for lack of a better phrase, training wheels for Brandt Clarke. So, I mean, Nick, as far as being training wheels for Brandt Clarke, I would argue mission accomplished. He's also scored more goals than I thought we'd see from him.
Yeah.
More than Brandt.
Yeah.
Edmondson is a defenseman. He's defending first. I mean, the points are a bonus for him. That's been with him throughout his career. And I'm looking back over the first 20 games. He missed 1 or 2 earlier. But, you hardly ever mention his name as someone who messes up a play or misreads a play when the opponent is on the attack, or an outlet pass is picked off in the middle of the ice. He's been consistently good. And I think because of that, it's why he's staying with young Brandt Clarke. Because if you're a coach and you put a young defenseman who can be a stallion, a wild horse at times, and that's fine because that's part of his makeup, Clark's makeup, you want him to be with a player you know what you're going to get night after night, which is why I think Clarke stays with Edmondson, because of Edmondson's consistency and his ability. Sometimes he has to clean up some mistakes that Brandt makes because Brandt is young, but they're getting, Brant's game is getting better in that regard. So, yeah.
Took the words right out of my mouth. I can think back now 7 or 8 games where I can say Brant Clark has not made a bad read. I'm not going to say mistake because most of Brant's great plays or bad plays are based on the initial decision to go or not to go. Now, we want him, I want that pendulum to swing back. Right now, he thinks he's playing a safe game, and I think it's because Joel has rubbed off on him. Joel's there as a safety valve, but I also think Brant is watching him going, you know what? If I just kind of play it that way. Now, you don't want to tame the loose horse. You just want to ring him in, get the reins a little tighter. You don't want to tame him. You still want him to have that wild.
I don't want to get too in the weeds on this, but there was a play against Buffalo where Brant Clark was at the right point. The puck was headed towards leaving the zone.
I know exactly what you're saying.
He didn't push forward. He backed off. Is that him being responsible or is that him being tamed?
That's him being responsible. But when you're down 1-0 late in the game, that's when the loose horse goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the score was when the play
remember exactly
happened,
the same play.
Yeah.
I'll go this far. In my opinion, it's only me. I want to see him keep that puck in.
I did too.
Early in the game, but hey, there's growing, there's evolving. That wasn't a growing pain because he caused no pain on it. He actually made the conservative decision. I would like to see him keep it in next time. He will get back to that. Believe me, he will get back to that and I think a lot of it is his teammates getting used to him. And I've seen him in the last 7 games, guys. I'm just going 7, I know, where he's been wide open and his teammates have not seen him because he's still surprising them with, what's he doing there? It's a defenseman. That'll catch up and it'll get to become a positive.
We just spoke to Carter George on the podcast this past weekend, and I asked Dale DeGray this question. I didn't ask Carter George because it didn't feel fair to ask a guy about himself. But my question to Dale DeGray was, Carter George unpredictable with his stretch passing as a goalie, Brant Clark unpredictable with his everything as a defenseman. Can those two unpredictable natures, coexist? And Dale DeGray was like, absolutely. You're going to see some wild stuff out there.
That's right. Brant will be on the receiving end of that long stretch pass for a breakaway as a defenseman. He'll be hanging on the far blue line.
Just to be clear, the high-scoring Carter George, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just
goal-scoring extraordinary.
If I can just add Edmondson. He said to me something earlier this year, which is, I guess they must think about it, but I said, if you're under pressure, what do you... And it fits his personality. It fits what Nick was talking about. He says, I just take a deep breath. And I'm going, what? We hear that in every walk of life, right? Just take a step back and take a deep breath. He said, you know what I do? I just take a deep breath. And I thought, wow, okay, it works.
Yeah.
So the last part of the will the added players have the desired impact is going to be the first part of the next question, which is how will goaltending impact the season. So here's where we talk about Darcy Kuemper. That first game against Buffalo, he was outstanding. I thought he has had more outstanding moments than not. Unfortunately, Nick, he's just been injured to start the season.
Yeah, a couple of stints on the IR where he is currently. But, great start. The game in Buffalo, I think his second game, that was the Boston game. He was also a star in that game. So he's done his part. Another year where the Kings go into the season with goaltending question marks because of the newness to the team of the goalies. Last year it was Cam Talbot, and that was fine. Cam's numbers in the first half were so good where he represented the Kings at the All-Star game. And, Kuemper, injuries aside, picking up basically where you'd like to see a goalie pick up. And then the backup, David Riddick. We used this on the air the other night. His numbers at home have been phenomenal. 7-2-2 last year with a 1.4, I think, goals against, 3 shutouts at Crypto.com Arena. This year, he's had 4 starts, lost 1-0 to Buffalo, his only loss at home. So he's 3-1, but he's only given up 6 goals. So, and I think his goals against, I made the note here, this is as of our recording date, 10th best goals against in the NHL. for Riddick, who's, because of injuries to Kemper, has started most of the game. So goaltending right now has been a strength for the Kings. And I don't know if any of us would have predicted that at the start of the season. I think we knew it would be good.
It was the question mark.
It was.
It was if not the question mark. And especially early in games. Some nights the other team is, and I think the Kings starts have been okay. It hasn't been a big enough trend, negative, Calgary, I think, and even Buffalo. You got to be better there. But the starts of games the Kings goaltenders have been real good.
I think we had a number on Kemper, maybe his last game he played before he got injured. What was it, in Colorado last week? But he had only given up like 3 goals in the first periods of all of his starts this year. Mm-hmm. And his save percentage was like .950. And then you look at Riddick's numbers, not only at home, but also on the road. I mean, goaltending's been good.
I don't know if David would be upset with me saying, I think he's exceeded expectations for me. Just
exactly.
Because then you were saying, well, you didn't expect him to. Big save Dave, which usually means a flopping goaltender who's diving all over the place. His technique with his upper body so upright, when you go down to a butterfly or you get low, a lot of goaltenders crouch and that opens up. He maintains a very big, strong position. And I've liked that about him. I remember earlier in the year, he had a tough time going post to post where he actually missed the post and couldn't jam across. There was a reach around, wrap around on the other side. Have not seen, you know what he did? He went to work in practice. I saw him the next day with Mike Buckley. They worked, and that's, as a coach, it has to be so rewarding that first of all, he understood he had to go work on it because he screwed up in the game, cost a goal, went out there, got better, and I'm sure there'll be a wraparound, by the end of the year, but for the meantime, he's done a good job correcting.
Yeah, there hasn't been one on him since. No. So good for him. Yeah. Be interesting to see the 6 goals he's given up at home. The winning goal with Buffalo was a deflection.
Yeah.
You can't, What are you going to do? Nobody's going to stop that.
No.
So, yeah.
So next question is, how will the rest of the Pacific Division / Western Conference perform? And without getting into details, I'm just going to run down the wild card situation in the West, because I think it's
getting tighter.
It is, and for
it's different than we thought at the beginning
of the
season.
But also everything that we've said in this episode about the Kings and how there's 60 some games left to turn it around. All of that could be said on on all the Kraken's men, on all the Flames men, et cetera, et cetera. So here's the situation. The Kings are currently in 3rd in the Pacific with 23 points. Colorado, who can't pass them in the Pacific, has 22 points. Edmonton, who very much can pass them in the Pacific, has 22 points. Vancouver has 21 and 2 fewer games played. Seattle has 21 points, the same amount of games played. The Blues have 19. The Ducks have 18. Utah and San Jose have 17. The Blackhawks and Predators have 15. I don't expect that San Jose, Chicago, or Nashville will improve dramatically to make a push, but they're within spitting distance, and a lot of teams are right behind them. So, I mean, that's why I say sort of flippantly.
And they're tougher teams to play against this year.
Yeah, well, sure, yes. You're not going to collect an automatic.
The only thing that I thought would happen before the season that has happened is that the gap last year in the Pacific between Anaheim and San Jose, teams at the top were feeding off those guys to the point where they couldn't win a game. That's not going to happen, and I think that's what's happened this year.
Look at the 4 divisions. The tightest division from top to bottom is the Pacific.
There you go. And last year it was huge.
San Jose, they're in games now. Yep. They have a chance to get points. Yep. Last year they were losing so many games by 3-4 goals. Yep. Not the case this year. So they've improved. Anaheim been on a nice run lately with all that young talent on not only up front but on defense. And the kid in goal, Dostal, is we talked about Riddick's numbers. I mean, Dostal's numbers have been a little bit better. So,
but Edmonton's not where we thought.
No.
Vancouver, maybe points-wise, but they're kind of
injury issues. Yes, for sure.
We thought that would
be
major
players
and the goalie. We thought at the beginning of the year, I think we mentioned that.
Besser,
and
and
then Nashville. I mean, they're not even close to where everyone thought. I'm not saying they're going to win the Stanley Cup, but so it's hey. we're in a position to have a fun rest of the year because it hasn't really followed the formula.
That's where, last year the Kings made it with 99 points, third in the division, right? Top three automatically get in. So the Kings were not a wild card last year. This year you could get in with 94 because it's so tightly compacted, right? Especially in the, I'm assuming it's going to be 4 and 4. 4 in the Central, 4 in the Pacific.
That's I think our first podcast.
So Vegas, Edmonton, I think for sure. Vancouver should, if they remain healthy. And I don't know if Demko is going to be the goalie he's been. If he does, that's huge for them. And then a lot of teams in the mix.
There's nothing to be done about it now, but in the first 20 games, the Kings have losses to Calgary and Vancouver. Those are losses that Calgary's directly ahead of them in the standings. Vancouver's directly behind them. Those are if those losses had happened in late March, those are considered catastrophic. Mm-hmm. They happen in October, November. So you're like, well, you got plenty of time, but those things add up. Now they also lost to the San Jose once, but San Jose in my mind isn't necessarily a competitor for a playoff spot. So you go, all right, well,
not giving them points.
Yeah. But losing to Buffalo is not great, but you shrug, you sort of go all right, well, it's an Eastern Conference team, whatever. But that's why I see Seattle on Saturday, I already said it, is sort of as close to a must-win as you can get in the month of November.
And I think this year, those division conference games are going to be more important because there are so many teams that are going to be in the mix until, it's all decided.
So we're modifying the final question, which was previously, will the Kings make the playoffs? And we're going to change it to now, and we'll start with you, Jim. What do the Kings have to do to make the playoffs?
To me, it starts with the power play. That's just 5-on-5. Everything looks fine. Analytics, the deep numbers, they look pretty good. Defending, suppressing shots. Everything's great that way. Good that way. So to me, I don't mean to put it on one specific area and only one, but the first thing that jumps out to mind is getting a power play that's going to end up 13th, 12th, around there. That'll get them into the playoffs. And then, that shooting percentage we just talked about, just getting back to a norm in that area. So that doesn't mean changing a lot offensively, meaning it doesn't change your strategy. It just hopefully you finish a little bit more. Of course, you want to keep improving the quality of chances. But I'm just going to keep it. The power play improves, the Kings make the playoffs.
I would agree. And I find it hard to believe that so many forwards that are struggling out of the gate. We talked about Byfield, Philip Deneau. Trevor Moore had 31 goals last year. He's got, 3? Although 2 of them have come in the last couple of weeks, so showing signs of getting better. So, again, the analytics, like Jim was mentioning, if you continue to get these opportunities, things should even out over the course of 82 games. So, given that, I'm not going to tell you that the Kings will be a playoff team. They will be in the hunt. Mm-hmm. And part of that is because other teams are catching up. There are teams in our conference that are pretty good and getting better that we didn't figure. A team that's a head scratcher for me is Utah. The old Coyotes. I thought they were going to have a better start. I don't know what their issue is. I know they have injuries on defense.
I did too. I thought they were coming to their own.
Yeah. And I don't know if the goaltending's been as good as it was last year, but we'll get 2 defensemen out, right? Dursey and one other guy.
That hurts,
forget his name. But, the teams in the West are good. And, will Nashville figure it out? If they figure it out, remember they went on a run in the second half last year, and they were one of the best teams in the league in the second half. So I don't know if that's going to happen again, but they certainly have a lot of good pieces there.
The thing what needs to be maximized, and it's right fresh in my mind. Buffalo. Lose to Buffalo. Okay. They're at 500. They're not a bad team. But according to the numbers we were given, the Kings had triple the amount of scoring chances. The Kings will have to maximize those opportunities the rest of the way, meaning you always know there's going to be 4 or 5 games a year where you outplay the other team and you lose.
Goaltending was good.
Yeah.
And yeah.
But the Kings have to maximize those situations now because of what Nick's talking about, because the rest of the conference, specifically the division, it's not going to be a gap anymore. When you get those opportunities at the end of the game, you have to limit those types of games to a maximum of 5. So we might be at 2 already, meaning you outplayed the other team but didn't get to 2 points. You're going to have to get those 2 points every time you play well.
I agree with everything you guys said. I don't have a magical solution for what they're going to have to do because my solution is just, well, they have to play better. And by play better, I mean offensively, because defensively, we know they're whatever top 10 in the league in shot suppression and shots not allowed. But 22-55, they both have to figure it out. The power play has to figure it out. We saw early in the season Turcotte, Laferriere, Clark carrying the team offensively. But, the blue line is like the goals have come from various places, but they need to. Yeah. We need to be able to look at Money Puck and look at the Kings' top lines and go, oh, that's the top line. That's the second line, production wise. According
to Money Puck, again, last time I looked, we were really high. I think we're probably still in. This is, I think it was all situations, expected goals, and the Kings were pretty high. Again, and we're talking about offense being an issue. Of
but
course,
if you don't win,
yes. Of course. Well, how many teams are going to win this year, Jess?
1.
Yes.
Well, that's what they've got. Ultimately, that's the answer. They got to win. They got to win more than they lose.
When is the Cohen-Fox fight?
Every day at practice. Yeah. First come, first serve, standing room only. Nick, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, a pleasure as always.
Jim,
we're going to do this midway through?
Yes.
All right.
At the 50.
I'm making my notes already.
All right, perfect. And then again at the 70. Jim is hiding the fact that he's telling Nick that he's not coming next time. Jim Fox, thanks as always. And thanks for listening, King Sense. We'll talk to you soon.